Okay, guys, we have a special guest today, Mr. Neil Eckhoff. He's going to be visiting with you about his experiences in the 9/11 cleanup. So give him your full attention, and he's got a lot of interesting stuff to share with us.
Well, thank you. First off, thanks for letting me be here today. It's been a while since we've kind of talked about this. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years ago. I don't know you guys were born. But all your parents will know exactly where they were at that moment in time when it happened. A little bit about myself. I was sitting in the same seats you were sitting in 25 years ago. So I've been in the exact room, probably the same desk.
Probably.
I might have a piece of gum underneath one of them. I'm Noah's dad, right there. Kyle's nephew. Noah was last, so I'm Ben's uncle. Everybody knows Ben, seems like. But anyway, I graduated in '98, and when I graduated here, when I was going to school here, I always wanted to be a fireman, and I like farming. I wanted to do both. So being a fireman was let me do both. With the schedule a firemen have, you get a lot of days off, and that's kind of what I pursued. That's what I did once I left here. When I graduated here in '98, I went to Columbia and did an internship for a fire department up there, and worked and lived in the fire station for 5 years there. Then I got hired at Kansas City Fire Department, and now 18 years I've been with the Columbia Fire Department. So I've bounced around, and during that time I've experimented with a lot of things in the fire service. I've gone out west a few summers when I was younger, before I had a family and wife and everything going on. I did forest fires for a few years. And while I was doing that, I wanted to broaden horizons, and I applied for, was accepted to be a part of the Missouri Task Force 1. That's what we're going to talk about today. And when I was at the task force, it takes a couple years to get all your trainings and to be able to be deployed. And just, I was able to get deployed on September 11th. So throughout this whole presentation, please ask questions. This is your all's class, your all's chance to learn. Since you weren't born, I can't comprehend that, because everybody I know, when we talk about it, they know exactly where they were in time. So when you go home today, ask your parents, where were you on September 11th? Ask them about what that day was like for them. Everybody had different experience and different story to tell on that day. And this is kind of my story today, and what I was doing, and so forth. So I was 21 years old on September 11th. I was still in college, and going to Mizzou as my last year at Mizzou, and then I actually had a job offer once I graduated to work in Kansas City that following December. So on September 11th, we'll talk about all that. Again, please ask questions. This is your time, and I'll just kind of fill you in on what I was a part of and what I did and what we did as a team collectively. So Missouri Task Force 1 is a urban search and rescue team. That's what its main goal is, for life safety and to save lives and to search for people in distress and help any way that we can on extreme bad events. Throughout the United States, there are 28 urban search and rescue teams. They are strategically placed throughout the United States. Most of them are on the East Coast, and there's 6 of them in California in the state alone. Reason being is the probability of bad things happening are on those two sides of the United States, because the population in California has a lot of earthquakes. So the team is designed to aid in searching for not only for terrorist events like September 11th, massive tornadoes. We went to Joplin, hurricanes. We've gone to Katrina. They just got back from Ida last week. So this team's always being deployed to different events. We've gone to, I haven't, but the team has gone to even, if you watch Space Shuttle was destroyed in launch on Columbia.
Challenger.
It was after Challenger. It was just about 10 years ago. Anyway, our search team went and helped locate parts of the Space Shuttle. So it's a very dynamic team. And on that team, there's 35 night guys and 35 day shifts, so a total of 70 people that's on the team when it gets deployed. And on that team, everybody has a discipline of what their job is, if you will. There's a search element, that's all they do is do the searching for people that are trapped or in distress, whatever. Then there's a rescue element, that's what I was a part of. Once the search team finds the chance or probability somebody could be trapped or what have you, the rescue team goes in and does the rescue portion. We also have a medical team. On this group of 70 people, we have ER trauma surgeons that travel with us. If someone's trapped and they have to have life-saving care, or physicians that travel with us will render that care. And also we have a support element that helps get logistics of things that we need and getting our radios working, because all that infrastructure, electricity and all that stuff doesn't work when we go someplace. Like in World Trade Center, all the radios, we had an antenna on top of the Empire State Building that allows us to talk in New York City. That's where they wanted to put up their radio stuff. We're totally self-sufficient for 72 hours. So everything that we take, we live off of our own stuff for 72 hours, because when we go someplace, like New York, like Katrina, all these bad incidents, that we just can't go to McDonald's and get a hamburger, because nothing works. Everything is off the grid, if you will. So we have to take all of our own stuff to be able for us to be beneficial. Also about the task force, we work for the local government, the local entity. We help aid in any way that we can. We don't go and just take over. We're actually an asset of theirs. We work around the clock, and as we work around the clock, we have, like I said, those different disciplines that we're all a part of. On the technical search side of things, those are the people that go out and do the search. They locate victims or whatever, and then we have a structural team that have a bunch of engineers that travel with us and monitor building movements or whatever we're working with, make sure everything's deemed safe or nothing's really shifting on us or making things worse. We have a rescue group, that's what I'm a part of, and like I said, a lot of things that we go to just aren't terrorist events, they're hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes. Anyway, like I mentioned, we have a medical team with us as well. And in that equipment that we carry, there's over 16,000 pieces of equipment that travel with us. It all weighs almost 80,000 pounds. Reason being, we have to stay underneath 2 semi-loads of equipment so that we shoot for 80,000 or less, so we can be transported in a timely manner. All the stuff combined, if you tally it up, is over $10 million worth of equipment that's at our disposal. And as a team, there's a roster every month that generates what team is at the top of the list to be deployed. Then the team, once they're at the top, they go to the bottom, and that way they can retool or redo stuff. But there's always a rotation of who's at the top nationally, of what teams, what state are to be deployed if an incident happens. Just so happens on September in 2001, Missouri was the first one at the top of the list. So if anything happened that month, we knew that we were going to go. Once that happened, we knew that we were going to go. So we were kind of ahead of the game anyway, because we were already packed and ready to go. So we have to be able to be on the road within 4 hours of something happening, like in Joplin. They were in Joplin within 4 hours after the tornado to help with us, since it's so close. And only 2 people can activate the team, because it's a very costly thing to mobilize this group of people, from physicians to all of us rescue guys. It has to come from the governor or the United States president. Because back in New York times, I don't know what the current dollar value was, then it was over like $2 million a day to us to operate every day. So it's a very costly thing. No one can just say, send us a task force, because it takes a lot of money to get us out to the All right, so a lot of these pictures from here on will be what happened on September 11th. A lot of these pictures you see in these slides, I didn't get to see until about 5 years ago, because a lot of these pictures were taken by our own people, and any pictures that were taken were considered evidence for the FBI and the people that recreated the scene and then all the investigations of the terrorist attacks. So all these pictures I didn't get to see until a few years ago. None of these pictures, or most of these pictures you won't ever see in a textbook or anything. All these were taken by our crews that were on the scene. So on September 11th, I was actually sitting at a desk just like you guys. I was taking a test at Mizzou. And it was an 8 o'clock test, and I think at 8:23 or 8:24, my pager went off and said, and I'll be able to know what a pager is in today's world. That's how we communicated back then. Was we didn't have cell phones that had instant message and all this technology at our fingertips. All the members of the team and so forth had these pages on their side that people would type into the computer and send it to you with a message. And I was taking a test that morning, and I got a text or a page that said, a plane has hit World Trade Center #1. And I thought, interesting. Because we get updates all the time for hurricanes is expected to be Category 4 off the coast of Florida. Stuff like that would happen. And they would constantly give us intel information through these messages. And I got this text that said, okay. Then it wasn't 15 minutes later, I don't know the exact timeline, I think it was 8:49 or so, the second plane hit the test. I was just finishing up my test. It says the second plane is at the second trade center, what's your status? And I said, well, and it wasn't 5 minutes later, I got another text that says, I need to know, we're being deployed, can you go? This is all before 9 o'clock a.m. on September 11th. And I thought, so I need to get up. They wanted to know my status right away. And I go to my teacher and said, his name is Borgell, so Mr. Borgell, I got to finish this test another time. And he was kind of taken aback. I said, you might want to turn the TV on. And he was appalled that we're taking a test. And I said, you want to turn the TV on? And he had no idea because, again, none of us had cell phones like we do now. If something like this was to happen now, everybody in this room, you get to carry your phones in class, but everybody would know relatively quickly if something was to happen. So I handed my test and said, I got to go. I said, seriously, turn the TV on. He turned it so only he could see it. And his look on his face as I was walking out was, I'll never forget, because he wondered how a 21-year-old college kid knew what was going on before he did or before he turned the TV on. So I left and got my stuff ready to go. And we already had it already pre-packed because, like I said, it goes back to that rotation schedule. We're at the top of the list. I already had my bags semi-packed for that month. So this is what happens once we get activated. The terrorist event happened. President Bush activated 8 task forces to go to World Trade Center and 4 to go to the Pentagon. 8 of us went to the World Trade Center. We got the mobilization orders. And this is what happens. We have to be moving within that 4-hour time frame. And all the stuff that we carry with us is palletized like this to be transported on airplanes. On September 11th, we were the only ones flying that day. All the planes were grounded except for the task forces heading to the East Coast. And we had military escort as we were flying. We had F-16s circling our plane as we were flying to the World Trade Center. So this is what happens. They bust us to Whiteman Air Force Base, which is over by Warrensburg, not far from here. And the military took everything very serious because we were under attack. We didn't know really what was going on at that point in time. So they had all the dogs, they had bomb sniffing dogs, sniffing all our stuff. The military was at a state of ultimate readiness because we were considered under attack at the time. They checked all our gear, and this is what they flew us out on. Was I think these are C-131 aircraft, and it took I think 4 of these to fly people and the equipment out to New York. This is what it kind of looks like. This is us going out that morning, early afternoon. And on the way out, the whole time we were getting ready to go and had to be on the road. We didn't have, again, cell phones. We didn't have time to be in front of the TV to understand really what was going on. All we knew is the trade centers collapsed and we're going to that. Once we got on the plane, things kind of calmed down because we had a 2 or 3 hour flight, at least 3-hour flight in these planes. And they finally gave us information of what we were going to. And on the way out there, they told us to expect 50 to 80,000 casualties. So that was uncomprehendable for me or anyone there, that 80,000 people could be dead to something they were going to. Luckily, it was way off of that. But that's what their projections were, because based upon that time of day, the traffic in and out of those two buildings and all the surrounding areas, Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, is how many people are projecting to be down at that site at that time of day. These are the same planes, if anybody has parents or anybody knows it's in the service, these are the same type of planes that get traveled and overseas. This is what they sit in, these cargo nets, and they fly them back and forth across the oceans. So once we got there, I kind of pulled the brakes on our response, because when the World Trade Centers 1 and 2, everybody thinks it is these 2 towers that collapsed. There's actually 8 buildings that were completely devastated. 8 tall buildings. Once the 2 buildings everybody sees in the pictures and the textbooks, once they collapsed, they caused secondary collapses and other problems. So once we got there that night of September 11th, we couldn't send people down there because of World Trade Center number 7. Once World Trade Center 1 fell, it landed at the base of that building, and they determined it was going to collapse at any given time. So we couldn't send people down there until that building came down. There's no way to shore it, it's so massive. We just had to let time run its course and let it collapse. So I think it was right at dark. I don't know the exact timeline, but it was sometime in the night time or so. The World Trade Center 7 collapsed. Then we sent people down there the following morning. So we didn't have boots on the ground until the morning of September 12th, because we didn't want to put more people in harm's way, because that building was going to fall. So they held us at an Air Force base. This is all of our stuff on these semis. And in the morning of September 12th, they shipped us all down there by police escort. These are the Greyhound buses they put us on. These are that's all of our equipment stacked on those semi-trailers. So then this is the morning of September 12th. This is the first group of our team from Missouri heading to the Trade Center. It was so congested and so much chaos that we just couldn't drive the buses there, because everything's gridlocked. They had to walk in. That's the smoke and the dust that you see in the background from the Trade Centers. And as we're walking, we started, you could tell when you're getting closer to ground zero, was you start finding all this paper and debris a long ways out, because when those buildings came, all that paper stayed there, just kind of floated out and the wind took it. So literally that was a foot deep worth of documents, and we saw family pictures from people's desks and cubicles that they work in, and all kinds of things quite a ways out, because it just drifted in the air. So that's just gives you an idea of what I don't know what it looked like. But anyway, half of us went down there to start seeing what rescue efforts and what we can do to get going. And half of us, I was on the night shift, we went back. So an operation like this has to have a base of operations that we work out of. So half of us went to the Jacob Javits Center to set up our base of operation, where we store all of our stuff and where we work out of. And it's probably, I don't know my time, it's probably only maybe a mile from the World Trade Center. We trucked in back and forth from there. This is what it looked like beforehand, and this is what it looks like once we set our stuff up and once we start conducting our operations. And this is all the stuff that we carry, that we live out of. Like I said, this was a 2-week deployment for us. And after 2 weeks, the USAR team is all it is urban search and rescue. After there's no chance of rescue or no chance for survivability, it turns into recovery mode. So we're only there for 10 days, 10 to 12 days, because after 10 days they deem it not a rescue effort, it switches over to recovery mode at that time for anybody there. So these are the bags that we were issued, that we live out of for 2 weeks. And that's one of our search dogs there. And this picture straight out of Wikipedia, this is what it looked like beforehand, for the terrorist attack. And this one here is what it looks like afterwards. So from West Street to Church Street down to Liberty and to the street to the north is 20 acres. There's a 20-acre debris field of just total destruction. So 20 acres, basically 1 acre is like a football field. So think of it as 20 football fields big out there together. That's how big a debris field these two buildings collapsed created. This is just another aerial photo of it. So this is Trade Center number 1, Trade Center number 2 set right here. And right here was that motel that set in between the two. And this is where Trade Center number 7 was. It fell and landed on that street over there. So throughout all these pictures, you see a lot of the same stuff, same debris. All these are windows, they're part of the World Trade Center. Each one of those, I think, was 20 foot tall, so to give you an idea how big and massive each one of these openings and how big this debris was. So this image here was the first image I saw once I got to ground zero, because like I said, there's so many buildings surrounding you, you just can't see it until you're actually there. We walked up to it, walked underneath another crosswalk, and this is the first picture we saw once we got to ground zero. And this here, I think, is about 200 foot tall. The debris still standing, or still collapsed. This is World Trade Center number 2, and there's a lot of hazards that we had to monitor because they were still afraid that this could fall, and we had people underneath it. So just a lot of things that we had to watch out for. And like pieces like this that were still standing, they were called flowers. We had to watch out for. That's Trade Center number 1 in the background. So how this works, once we get there, we send the search group out. They go out and do a search for an area that we think somebody could be in, or a high probability that somebody could be trapped in. So that search element has the dogs that sniff out for live victims. Also, they carry, this is 20 years ago, and they have a lot better stuff now, but back then it's pretty high-tech stuff. This is a search camera that has a TV monitor on it, and this looks like the stick that he's holding actually telescopes out with the camera on the end of it, that they can snake through rubble and find and see somebody. If somebody was trapped in there, he could talk to them. He can take their heart rate, and because he has headphones on, he can listen to it. Also, when someone's trapped, they'll yell for help, or they'll beat on a piece of steel or something, and he'll listen for that as he's searching for something. Once they find a void or something that we look for, then we would try and search it or make entry into it. It's just another vantage point of it. That's it. The telescope's out, and I think this one here is actually a picture of them using it as an FDNY guy. They're looking through something there to find, just hoping to find somebody that was still alive. This is that's one of our dogs again. I should remember the dog's name. Dogs had a lot of trouble with all that dust, and their noses are very sensitive. There's so much dust in the air that the dogs only could spend 15 minutes at a time, and they had to get them away and get them fresh air and bring them back in. So a lot of these pictures have a lot going on to them, but basically what you see here is some more destruction. And out of the 8 task forces that were initially there, we were assigned to basically a geographical area to be, that was our piece of the pie, if you will, that we worked and focused in. But most of the time we spent was at World Trade Center number 2, and this is part of World Trade Center number 2 right here. And we go in, we send a search group in. We would if they found something that we'd like to search or make entry into, we make entry into it. Once whatever we found, the outcome was, we would want to go down another layer. So basically when buildings collapse, a lot of times they call it what's called pancake effect. The top floor comes down, causes the full load to come down, and they just keep doing that. So if you watch one of the images, you see one of the towers kind of doing this as it goes down. So once we take a layer at a time, once the building collapses, we start at the top, take a layer, we search it, check the voids, then what they call the volunteers and the bucket brigades would come in and take the debris out, and we take the steel and go down another layer. So that's where all these images that you see were bucket brigades, people that literally fill buckets full of debris, take it out, and go down another layer so we can do another search in another layer. This is just more of the same. These pieces of steel, I think they told us a 1 foot section long is 300 pounds because it's 1.5 inches thick support steel to hold those buildings up. So massive amount of debris, massive weight to contend with. And being so massively of steel, when those came down, it basically pulverized everything in its path. Turned all the concrete that those buildings were made of, all the floors and the exterior and glass and everything, turned it to dust. So basically the only thing left of all this buildings was the paper in the streets, floated off, and then this piles of steel was pulverized everything as it came down. So to give you an idea, on the street level, it was about 200 feet tall-ish, and below street, it was 60 to 80 feet down. What you see down here, we actually did a rappel down the bottom because there's all kinds of things in the basement. A lot of the cities have a lot of stuff underneath the streets as well as up top. Down here was the subway station and everything below the World Trade Centers. We went down there to check the subway, make sure everybody was out with the train cars and everything. So here's a subway car. You can see the sign there. So that's in the basement, about 80 feet below street. The trade centers was this. Just another vantage point down the subway. And as we're there, we have those engineers and all the other elements doing their jobs. As we're there, the engineers were monitoring all the things that can move and could harm us. Because below here is all the rescue efforts going on. Up here is part of the trade center. When one of those buildings collapsed, the pieces of those buildings went into other buildings. So we have people underneath here. We need to make sure that stuff like that ain't going to fall down on top of us. So we spent several hours one morning carrying cables up flights of stairs to tie this thing off because the engineers were monitoring a piece of the building because it was wanting to come back out of the building and it fell when it went in. So we did other things just like that. Then we also went around the perimeter because when the towers came down, the power grid to lower Manhattan was turned off, if you will. So a lot of people were in these high-rise apartments and businesses. They couldn't get down because all the elevators were stopped. So we had to help locate some people and get down some flights of stairs that couldn't get down themselves. So this is just one of the vantage points. There's apartments like this all the way around trade centers. This is where somebody used to live. And this window here was their view of the World Trade Center right there. That's what, looking out that window. That's how close they were. And this image here might look just more of the same. There's an American flag right there. I don't know what's in your textbooks, but if you were to Google images of World Trade Center, there'll be two that you'll find in the top 10 of your searches. One will be, that flag will be in it, in this pile right here. Does anybody recognize those two pictures? That's where the president stood, and that's the flag that the party raised. before the president got there. In this picture, if you go to the museum, you'll find a lot of other interesting things. This is World Trade Center number 6. The dead center part of it was World Trade Center Cross. It has the whole story behind it. That's where that was at. Right here, I'll point out several of them. There's one there, one here, there. Where these guys are. Maybe I know what those are. Those are fire trucks. This one here, the flag's at, is in the museum. If you ever go to it, you'll see it on display there. It'll tell the whole story behind it. There's another one. Let's look for one. And actually, there's one underneath there too. So, about I'll say day 6, day 7, we were there. The mood completely changed because when we were first there, we were very hopeful that we could find somebody alive. This many people affected, surely we could find somebody or do some good. There was so much mass destruction that by day 6 and 7, we knew nobody was coming out of the thing alive. So all of us basically on the team, us the engineers and the surgeons, ER surgeons, we're all firemen. We're very passionate in our profession. So about day 7, day 8, we switched our mode of operations to locating our own. There's 343 firemen that perished that morning trying to help others. So we started recovering a lot of the downed firemen. And places like this is where we'd find when those buildings start collapsing, they was trying to seek shelter any way they could, and they would be underneath their fire trucks, underneath some of those walkways that were attached to other buildings. So towards the end, we tried to make some positive out of this, all this negative. And we wanted to help any way that we could. So since we're all firemen, we tried to help and locate the bodies of other firemen so those families can have some closure. So when we got demoted, we did 10 days. This is the night of September 22nd. And that night, we were at a military base with a group of military guys. And that night, President Bush came on and addressed the nation and basically declared a state of war against all terrorists all across the globe. At that point in time, we knew once we got a chance to digest everything, we knew that the times we live in is completely different than it was 10 days ago. And your parents will tell you the exact same thing. There was 2 times there's 2 different times that we lived pre 9/11 and post 9/11 as individuals. And this is kind of when it sunk into me, is when President Bush addressed the nation and said we're going to war. I knew I had friends in the military that when I went to school and they sat in the same seats you guys did, they had to go fight the terrorists and their lives changed. I knew that was going to happen. So we got demoted and we flew back, actually back to Whiteman Air Force Base. This is the group that went, and when we got to Whiteman Air Force Base, they had an event for us, a lot of guys in the service. We got to talk with a lot of them. And what's at Whiteman Air Force Base that most military bases don't have? It's a big black plane that you see in the sky. You know what it is?
Bomber.
So B-52 bomber. It was that bomber, dude.
Flies over and destroys things.
Yes. So we got to meet with the pilots and the commanders of the Air Force Base, and they took us back to an area and down an elevator, and I don't know, that's where they keep the bombs. And we got to write a message. A group of guys and girls from Missouri got to write a message, and all the bombs were being dropped first on the terrorists of what we wanted to tell them and how we felt. So that was kind of a neat thing that we got to do once we got back, because that was the first, those bombers, the first wave, if you will, to retaliate against these terrorists. And they came right here from Missouri. And that's basically it in a nutshell. This is, like I said, this is your all's time. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer what we did or I did or what have you. But you guys got any questions?
Okay, so somebody in the last class asked
Sorry for
about.
the interruption. This is